Professor Roach, great to have you with us. Your students built a registry that shows 83 people have been exonerated in Canada. Would you be able to give us an overview of just who these people are?
Sure. So these are people who have been convicted or pled guilty, and then new evidence has been discovered, and they've either been acquitted or they have the prosecutor has not proceeded against them. Of the 83, 14 are Indigenous men, 2 are Indigenous women. And we in no way think that this is all of the people who have been wrongfully convicted in Canada. We think this is tip of the iceberg.
So, Professor Roach, you and I know that there are far more Indigenous people in prison than any other race. So why isn't this reflected in the registry?
Well, I think it isn't reflected for the same reasons that over a third of the prison population is Indigenous. There is discrimination in the justice system, and that includes in the process of getting errors corrected or remedied. So the fact that there's 16 shows that there's a problem, but that is an underrepresentation compared to the over 1/3 of the prison population, and of course even higher numbers with Indigenous women and Indigenous youth.
Well, we've done stories here at APTN on some of the Indigenous people on your list. Well, why do you think they're not household names like David Milgaard, who was exonerated on new DNA evidence?
Yes, no, I mean, it's an important question. And in fact, we were very inspired by APTN reporting about both the Clayton Boucher case and the Connie Oakes case in Alberta. And Alberta is actually in second place with 12 wrongful convictions. And of course, this goes back to Wilson Nepus's case, which came right after Donald Marshall Jr.'s case. And Alberta has never had a public inquiry into a wrongful conviction, and most of its wrongful convictions have involved Indigenous people. And so there may unfortunately be a relationship between that. I think it's also that there's developed an expectation that there will be a clear-cut kind of DNA exoneration. But the problem is that DNA only applies in a minority of cases, and if you assume a halfway competent justice system, and I agree that sometimes can be a stretch, DNA should be used to exclude people. And I come back to the Wilson Nepus case because, you know, the victim in that case was one of the many missing and murdered Indigenous women, Beverly Desjardins. And so it shows that at least in those whodunit cases where the police and the prosecutors and the justice system gets it wrong, it's also Indigenous people that often pay the price, because Indigenous people, as you know, are disproportionately subject to victimization by crime.
Right. So, Professor, now that you've built the registry, what are you hoping happens next?
Well, there's a couple. As Amanda Carling, a Métis woman who's a co-teacher of me, has said, we wanted to tell the stories as best we could from public documents about these 83 people. All of these people matter. And so now you can go onto the website. It's at www.wrongfulconvictions.ca, and you can read on the stories of these people based upon publicly available documents. So it's a bit of honoring these people. The second purpose is we hope that this raises awareness among law students, justice students, and justice system participants, because it's been a long time since we've had a public inquiry into a wrongful conviction. And if people are not reminded about this, out of sight, out of mind. And so we hope that this reveals new causes and new patterns. One of the striking findings we find is that 18% of the cases, of the 83 cases, were guilty pleas, including Clayton Boucher. So this says really every case in the justice system, not just the contested trials, which are the minority, but the guilty pleas, is a potential miscarriage of justice. And the second finding that we think is really significant is a third of the cases, the third of the 83 cases are cases where no crimes were ever committed. And of course, you think about the Charles Smith case where he thought dirty often about Indigenous caregivers. And Tammy Marquardt and Bill Mullins Johnson, both Anishinaabe people, were wrongfully convicted of murders that never happened. Of children that unfortunately died from natural causes. And we tell the story of another Indigenous man from New Brunswick, James Turpin, which I think is an important reminder that some of the problems that we saw in Ontario in the Charles Smith cases didn't just necessarily go away with Charles Smith, they persist. And the problem with imagined crimes is too often stereotypes and suspicions about Indigenous people are translated into convictions and guilty pleas, even though the justice system is supposed to give all accused the benefit of a reasonable doubt.
Well, Professor Roach, important work indeed. Appreciate you speaking with us about it.
Thank you, Dennis.